Make sure to subscribe to the Volume YouTube channel so you can catch all of our shows and get what everybody wants, more of me. I think he does as good a job as anybody in the country in college basketball, Aaron Torres. Fox Sports Radio, host of the Aaron Torres Podcast. He really knows his stuff, author of One and Fun, the book about the 2010 Kentucky Wildcats. Listen, this is now a cliche, but it's been a really great tournament. We've had Aaron, like the St. Peter's story is obviously great. Miami shocked me. I don't really get them. I'm 5 minutes from UCLA. I watch them all year long, and I'm like, they're just, I don't know what I get. Then I watch them in the tournament. Then the minute I fall in love with them, they get whacked by Carolina. So, I mean, my takeaway is we ended up with a lot of blue bloods. I like that. But it's interesting. I don't feel we have a great team. I think we have 4 good teams. I think Duke feels like, to me, the most talented. But you do this. You love this. You watch all of these. You're encyclopedic. Did this tournament have more upsets? Did it feel different? Or is it just the fact that it's been good TV, good announcers, good times mostly, right? Outside of a couple late games, it just feels this year has been special.
Well, Colin, I mean, I think the biggest thing with this tournament, we got to remember, this is the first time in 3 years that we've had a normal tournament. And, as the Carolina game goes final, we realize we're getting this Final Four basically of a television, executive's dream, right? As much as there can be. I went back and you think about it, 2020, the NCAA tournament's really the only major sporting event that really ended up being canceled. We figured out a way to play the NBA in a bubble, Major League Baseball in a bubble, the NFL with limited fans. Then last year, the 2021 tournament is planned in the middle of the pandemic. And so it was really the last major sporting event that felt like a COVID sporting event. 2 weeks later, we're starting the NBA playoffs. We have full arenas. I mean, I remember turning in that first Knicks game against the Hawks, Madison Square Garden's rocking. And so I think it's a lot of things. I think that the early rounds were awesome. They were fun. You have the storylines that always carry the tournament. You have the familiar faces in Coach K, Jay Wright, Bill Self later. And then I really think fans in the stands, normal time schedule, like you said. If you remember last year, we were playing games on like Monday, Tuesday nights.
Yes.
It's just good to have it feeling a little bit normal again after 3 full years. 2019 was the last time we had one of these normal ones.
And even though we have blue bloods, let's talk about this. So I watch more Duke and Gonzaga than anybody else because I know Mark Few. I went to college up there, so I probably watch a half dozen games a year. I always watch Duke when they're on, and they're on constantly. But let's talk about that. So let's start with Duke. I think they're the most talented team. They got a 5-star point guard who is not as good as everybody thinks, and yet I watch them in the tournament, and I'm like, oh, total gamer. It feels like he's busting out and becoming like a star. But when I watch them play, my eyes tell me that, and this is, I think, endemic of college basketball, they're figuring out how to play together finally, but they feel like the most gifted team athletically, are they?
Oh, there's zero doubt. And it's crazy because, they just, I don't really ever remember anything quite like it where they have a couple really nice wins early in the year. You mentioned being a Gonzaga guy and knowing that program well. They played in Vegas on Black Friday. I was there. Duke won. And you came out of that game saying Duke's the best team in the country because Gonzaga had just destroyed UCLA a few nights before. So that's all the way back in November. Then we have 2.5 months where they basically hit cruise control in the ACC. And that was kind of the crazy thing about it to me coming into this tournament was I sat there and said, hey, listen, by the way, I am not the guy that picked Duke, so I'm not trying to take credit and pat myself on the back. But it was also kind of crazy to think about most talented team, legendary coach, in a tournament where everybody has stuff to play for. They have the most to play for, sending out Coach K in style. Yeah. And so I think not only have they figured it out, Colin, but what I notice is, and I'm sure you've noticed it too, they're figuring it out throughout the tournament, right? Like the Arkansas game felt easier than the Texas Tech game. The Texas Tech game felt easier than the Michigan State game. And so what does that mean for next weekend in New Orleans? I don't know, but they are the most talented team. That's why I thought they would give Arkansas trouble. Arkansas, what they're great at doing is taking away what you do best but you got 5 NBA players on the floor, you could do just about anything you want at any given time. And we saw that in the Saturday games. And I think you're spot on. They're by far the most talented team. We'll see if they get these 2 final wins. But as you said, very much figuring it out here as we go along in this tournament.
So I watched Kansas twice this year. One of the times I watched them was against Kentucky. And it just wasn't a good, I think it was a Saturday game, and it was bad. In the second half. And I thought they don't have enough offensive firepower. Kentucky I don't remember the final score. I think I turned it off at one point, but Kentucky was kind of rolling, if I recall. Was it a 20-point game?
Well, I know because I looked this up after Kentucky lost to St. Peter's in the opening round. Yes, it was an 18-point Kentucky win. Yep. And Kansas, not to bore people with too much here, but it's kind of what you said about Duke. And it's crazy to think about Hall of Fame coaches, veteran players, but they brought in a few guys through the transfer portal. And I know it's been a topic that you've discussed at length, how the transfer portal is changing college sports. And I think they thought they were going to be instant impact guys right away. There's a guard named Remy Martin who came from Arizona State, all Pac-12 guy. He has injuries. Bill Self kind of sort of publicly says that he's not really bought into the way we do things. And then all of a sudden, the last 3 weeks, he's 15, 20 points off the bench, and he's that guy. And so the team that you saw in January was the team that I saw in January and February and March, thinking, okay, I get why they've earned a number 1 seed. I don't see them making this run. And it just kind of speaks to exactly what you just said of the idea that teams get better throughout the year. And I just think this is now the world that we're going to continue to live in as teams get younger. Now the transfer portal is a bigger deal. And Kansas, all of a sudden, I'm not kidding when I say it was really like the last 4 or 5 games that they started playing at the level that they're playing at now.
Yeah, no, this is something I've talked about, the transactional nature of college basketball. I was joking with a friend. I'm like, I don't know how people bet this sport, because in the NBA, I kind of know what I get. Even though the Celtics have played really well, I know kind of the player I get with Tatum, the player I get with Jaylen Brown, and Marcus Smart. I know their strengths. I know their weaknesses. I've seen them play together. I kind of know what I get. You could be a casual NBA fan and go, yeah, I've seen Steph, Clay, and Draymond. They've added Andrew Wiggins, draft Jordan Poole. He's grown. But I kind of know what I get. In college, November to March is a 19-year-old, often the best players. And so it's funny. So I watched Villanova this year. I thought Houston would beat them. I thought Houston would beat him. I thought it would be ugly, low scoring. Gillespie didn't play well. And as I watch Villanova, I've come to this conclusion. This happens with comedians. There's a hot comedian. You're like the funniest guy on the planet for 5 years. Then you get rich and you're not as funny, right? Jim Carrey, it can be Ben Stiller, Mike Myers. Right now, last 6 years, Jay Wright's the best coach. That's the best program in the country. Defend at all levels. Tell me how wrong I am.
No, and it's funny, on my Fox Sports radio show on Saturday, I asked my co-host this, and I'd be curious. I know you've known Jay Wright a long time. I think he's weirdly become he just third Final Four since 2016, okay? Kentucky's a lightning rod. They haven't been there since 2015. Duke before this year hadn't been there since 2015. And Villanova wins, and they do it yesterday, and a guy gets hurt, and they close out the game, and it's just like, oh, Villanova's going to the Final Four. Another Final Four for Jay Wright. And it just feels like to me, and, I think it's some of the way. I think, first of all, part of it is I don't think Jay Wright's very controversial. I know you know him. I've interviewed him a few times.
Yeah.
He's the nicest guy in the world that I've ever dealt with. Not the nicest, but, he's a great guy, easy to get along with. Not controversial, doesn't yell at the media, doesn't yell at refs. I don't know. I don't know. But that was my takeaway on Saturday night was, Villanova's going to another Final Four. Okay, on to the next game, as if it's not a huge deal and if it's not a major accomplishment. And so I'm with you. That's been one of my big takeaways from this tournament is I think we're now at the point where we're just starting to take this program for granted. The other thing about them, too, that I love, we talk about the one and done and transfers and this and that. They do a great job in recruiting of evaluating the right guys, of bringing in guys that are going to buy into what they do. You talk about transactional. I mean, I looked it up today. I think they have 2 fifth-year seniors, a fourth-year junior, something like that. And the point is they buy in. They're not in a rush. They trust the process. They trust the Hall of Fame coach. And like I said, I think however many Big East championships now, a third Final Four since 2016, I do think they're like weirdly underrated. I truly believe that.
You know what it is, Aaron? And I really believe this. Because their first national title was so shocking, their DNA, even as the best program in the last 6-7 years, their DNA is underdog DNA.
Sure.
They view themselves, even as an 8-point favorite, as this hard scrabble. I mean, Gillespie's dad's a cop, no scholarship offers.
Yep.
And look at him. Like, I think he was the co-conference player of the year.
Awesome, yeah.
Right. So, and the other kid in the backcourt ripped up his ACL like his sophomore year. Wake Forest offered Villanova. So even they have the advantage, even when they're favored, they see themselves as the underdog when they play all these blue bloods. And that's you know what, man, that's an incredible advantage that they don't get high on themselves. Like, I never go into a game and think they didn't show up. Now, there are games that don't shoot well, but the intensity is literally, you could take it game to game for 39 games.
I'll tell you a funny story on that. So I had a buddy covering the Big East tournament in Madison Square Garden. I'm a UConn alum. They beat UConn. And I did the joking text of, I might just auto advance them to the Final Four in my bracket. I don't even need to see a bracket, right? And then the bracket comes out. And Colin, I know you like Tennessee. I like Tennessee, for the record, not here to criticize. I loved Arizona. I saw them in person twice. I said, that's the most talented team in the country. And then, oh, by the way, we got to the Sweet 16 and you just referenced Houston, and they're so big and they're so athletic. So, I mean, just in that region, we're talking about 3 teams that we spent the last 2 weeks talking about. Is Arizona the most talented team? Tennessee's the hottest team coming in. Houston, oh my goodness, Kelvin Sampson, how is he doing it at this school that's been off the radar for 30 years? So just in that region, just to get to a Final Four, there were 3 teams that throughout this tournament, everybody was talking about. So I think that pretty much, encapsulates exactly what you're talking about in a nutshell there.
Well, I have confirmation bias because I saw Tennessee. They beat Kentucky twice. I watched one of the games. I watched them like 3 times. They were great.
They are.
Every time I saw them, they were great. I watched Kansas twice. They didn't do a thing for me. I watched Arizona 2 or 3 times. They were unbelievable. I saw them at home beat UCLA. I think they beat them by about 15 at home. So again, you watch all the games I don't, and I can be lulled to sleep. So, Carolina, when I would turn on a game in the regular season, and I was like, But it's funny. Hubert Davis was known as a really classy player, kind of elegant, family guy. He gets the job, and I follow stuff on Twitter, and I'm like, what? Wow, the pushback. Like, he's got NBA connections, very respectful. I mean, he's not selling himself, and here they've done it. He's pivoted, and you watch him, and you're like, of all these teams, I think, what are they, an 8 seed? They're the one that shocks us. But I think I'm more interested, what is it about Hubert Davis? Was he considered a reach as a hire? Why does he get pushback?
Yeah, well, I think really to me, and I'll say this, and I said it all year, is that there are those few jobs that, and it goes back to the book that you mentioned. I mean, I remember asking John Calipari, this was when John Calipari was hotter than he is right now, but, you had it rolling at Memphis. Why leave Memphis? You made a Final Four with Derrick Rose, this, that, the other thing. And he said to me, when Kentucky calls, you pick up the phone and you don't say no. And so I've used that analogy many times with Hubert Davis in the sense that Roy Williams retires late in the spring. And I think, truthfully, Roy Williams retired at the time that he did on the calendar to make sure that his guy got the job. But I think there was a big contingent of people that wanted to see North Carolina go out and do the national search and throw a bunch of money at a lot of big names. And maybe one of them would take it and maybe one of them wouldn't have. Because it's fun, right? Like the Lincoln Riley stuff was awesome. It was 8 days of content when the Oklahoma coach leaves for USC or the Notre Dame coach Brian Kelly leaves for LSU. And so I think because North Carolina is such a big brand, I think there was this thought that when the job opens, you can't just hand it off to the next guy. And they did. And so I think that was a little bit of the pushback. And especially when it happened, right? Coach K retires in June. That's a lot. And oh, by the way, he's not retiring for a year and a half. So that's a little bit different than it's April. The coaching kind of stuff is already happening in the midst right there. Can you make a call or two to one or two of the big names? See if you can get somebody to budge. See if you can get somebody to do what John Calipari says, and ultimately don't say no in the way that he didn't say no to Kentucky. You don't say no to Carolina. So that to me is, I think, why the biggest pushback was with Hubert Davis. They didn't play well early either. You know, a lot of bad, really, frankly, defensive efforts. You go back and look at the box scores. I mean, 90-plus points to Wake Forest and Kentucky and Tennessee. They played all these teams early, get destroyed. But he figured it out. It seems to be the theme of this tournament. The theme of our conversation is the teams that were great early might not be great late. The teams that weren't great early are starting to figure it out. And so I think they're the greatest. They're maybe the best example of that in this tournament still.
Two teams that disappointed. Let's start with Gonzaga. So the last several years, let's take the last two. It's not that they've lost. It's the way they've lost. I feel like they get out-physicaled and pushed around a little. Now, they do a good job, Mark Few does, to get out of conference. They go to Hawaii. They'll go to the major, they'll play the Dukes and the Kansas, whoever. And then they go, not that they put it on cruise control, but they win regularly by 25, the Pepperdine, San Diego's, Loyola. It sounds like places where you'd want to go vacation. And I don't think of that conference, the WCC, as the gauntlet of, the ACC or the Big 12 this year, which was outstanding. The SEC this year was outstanding. So, and then they get into the tournament. And the first couple of games, because they're a 1 seed, they cruise through it. And I said the other day, because they don't have football, they're probably not going to go to another conference. But should they tweak their recruiting? That they've got they're very finesse and very clever offensively. I never worry about that end of the floor. But Baylor pushed them around. Last year, UCLA pushed them around. Arkansas won a lot of the 50-50 balls. And I think, do they need to tweak their recruiting, or am I overreacting to a tough loss to a good team?
No, I think, when I think about Gonzaga, what I would say is, people always say they're overrated. The program, I don't believe the program's overrated. What I go back
Neither do I.
Yeah, like what I keep going back to, they got destroyed by Baylor. I'm not defending that. But there was last year one team in that tournament that was better than them. And we've all watched the tournament forever. Rarely do you get the two best teams at the end of the season. And, if Baylor is a twisted ankle or a bad foul call away, Gonzaga wins last year. And so it's hard for me to be overly critical of Mark Few or the program when they've been to 2 title games in the last 4 or 5 years. And again, they were clearly the second. Like, they go back and look at the box scores. They beat in the Elite Eight. They won by, I think, 20 points against USC with Evan Mobley last year. So I don't believe they're overrated as a program. I thought maybe they were a little bit overrated as a team.
I did too. I didn't love this team. First of all, Chet Holmgren, I think it took them time to figure out how to use him. Mm-hmm. Seriously, I think he's really skilled. I don't know how he's going to pivot to the NBA. But even against Arkansas, I'm like, do they know exactly? I mean, it's hard, right? You get these kids, they're top recruits. You don't want to coddle them. But they're really gifted. I didn't love them all year.
No, I didn't either. And so, and I think, like what I've said is the conference doesn't help, but I don't think it hurts as much as people think. But this year is the year that I thought it hurt, because I do think in a normal conference, they'd be what Duke was, what whoever was. They'd be 24-8, and we'd be talking about them as a 2 seed, and we'd say, okay, they're good, but they didn't play good enough competition in the season because the conference just doesn't give them those challenges. So I'll be curious to see what they do going forward, because Tommy Lloyd, that assistant coach that's now the head coach at Arizona, it's a little cliche, but he was the international guru. He was the guy that really brought in all those guys. Turiaf, Sabonis, who's playing well in the NBA, Rui Hachimura, who's playing. And so do they go more American? Do they try to stick international? And hate to say it, but we all know the American kind of system and culture is kind of different. You want to get out of school faster. It's the reality of the situation. So I'm genuinely curious. You asked about recruiting. I'm genuinely curious just to see what the next 3 to 5 years for them looks like, because I think as Tommy Lloyd is out, again, the new Arizona coach, or the now Arizona coach for a year, I think that international influence is going to wane. And how do they recruit? Where do they recruit? One thing they've done really well, develop players in their program, third, fourth year players. I don't know. Mark Few, maybe you could get him on the phone and get me some insight, because I'm just curious how he envisions where he wants this program to go over the next 4 to 5 years.
So another disappointing team was Kentucky. Now we know they lost to a pretty darn good team, but I'll throw this at you. So Calipari really jumped on the one and done and had like a 3 to 4 to 5 year jump on everybody. Then Duke started getting beat by one and done teams and said, let's get into it. I would argue now they're beating Kentucky at their own game. So he's not getting quite as many, still getting first or second best recruiting class, but he's not, it felt like for 4 to 5 years, he wanted him, he got him. Okay, now he's losing some. Now we have the transfer portal. So now you've got an even more transitional sport. And does he need to tweak that a little? And again, they're winning 28 games a year. Let's not go overboard, but they haven't been to the Final Four since, let me look it up here, 2015. So that's for Kentucky. That's like Alabama not getting to the playoff for 3 or 4 years. Like, that's a stretch, right? So do they have to tweak?
Well, the problem for Calipari is, he tweaked a lot this year. I mean, this year he went super hard in the portal, and part of it was COVID. You couldn't get out to see players last year, all that stuff. So he brings in 4 or 5 guys, and I think that's really why Kentucky fans are frustrated. And I know that certain fan bases get bad reputations and all that, but I understand their frustrations, because for 3, 4, 5 years, probably closer to 8 or 9, every time something bad happened, we're young, be patient, give us time. It's going to be okay. And when you lose, we're the youngest team in the country. What are you going to do? Well, this year he had one of the oldest teams in the country, and he loses in the first round. And you know what he did? I don't know if you saw this, Colin. He goes to the podium and he goes, well, none of these guys have been here before. What did you want? It's like, how many guys on St. Peter's had played in the NCAA tournament before that night? And so, that to me is, I think, the most interesting kind of maybe topic in college basketball right now. I think Gonzaga is right there as well, is what does he do? Because I think he's at a point now, and I've said this and I truly believe it. I don't think there is anything that John Calipari can do to win back the majority of his fan base until the 2023 NCAA tournament. I heard you kind of talk about the recruiting. They've signed every 5-star there is to sign. They've gotten the best players out of the portal now. He shook up the coaching staff last year, and it all resulted in a first-round loss to a 15 seed who admittedly is better than we thought, but it doesn't change the fact that you lost to I don't think there's anything he can do until next year's NCAA tournament to win back the majority of the fan base. I truly believe it. I really do.
Yeah, listen, he's a good salesman, and I think his ability to fend off Kentucky fans in these disappointing years, it illustrates his ability to, he's a salesman, and that is often seen as a negative, but he can sell players, he can sell media, he can sell fan base, he can be confrontational and argue back. He's not passive aggressive. If he thinks something, he'll say it. He was feisty when he was an assistant. That's his reputation. He's a feisty guy with everybody, but listen, it's when you're great, expectations are high. The New York Mets will put a wild card banner. The Yankees don't in their stadium. That's just the reality of Kentucky basketball.
Well, and that's part of the frustration that I get is, some people say, he's all these Elite Eights, couple Final Fours. I get all that. He's also paid $8.5 million a year. This isn't Little League Baseball. He's doing it out of the goodness of his heart. Like, he's cashing a big check at the end of every season. And so I'll be curious to see what happens. He's going to have talented players no matter what. It's fascinating. And I think, like I said, the fan base, I believe, has the right to be frustrated. You missed the tournament last year. It's COVID, whatever, who cares? Oh, by the way, Duke missed the tournament last year. They bounced back pretty nicely this year. And as you said, they did bounce back nicely for most of the regular season, but it fell apart with that tournament loss at the end.
It's interesting. I don't know why I instinctively think this. Every time Duke has a great run, I know it must eat away at Calipari. Because no doubt. I think, listen, he took a shot at Duke in their recruiting, their one-and-done stuff, saying, they say, we'll take care of you for life. And he's like, we don't sell that stuff. And my takeaway is, it's recruiting. You do whatever you got to do. You just show the kid more love if that's the way Duke shows the love. But I do think because I think we understand Duke is a private, small, academically, I understand athletes can take classes, but I think instinctively, Kentucky should be better than Duke, right? Like Kentucky should be better than Duke. The revenue, the arena's bigger. They recruit in the South big. They are the name in the South. Or is that unfair? And that Duke, because they're so prestigious, should be the best team in college basketball?
Well, Duke has the 30-year track record of the same guy in that seat. And now, Coach K, you can say what you want about him, but 5 national championships? The other thing that Coach K did a great job of selling probably about 7-8 years ago, all those Olympic gold medals. Oh, yeah, I coach Kobe. I coach LeBron. I coach KD. There's no high school player that there isn't a comp to in Coach K's Rolodex. So, are they supposed to be better? I don't know. What I would say is definitively, they're not supposed to be losing to St. Peter's. And it's like you said, 7 years. So Final Four 2015, that's 7 years. 1 year, there's a COVID season. There's no tournament played. So really the last 6 tournaments. What I would say is this. So actually, I think you'll like this, Colin. I don't know if you saw me say this the other day, but right now, to me, they are the Dallas Cowboys of college basketball. And it's because they win in the regular season. They win enough where you can't really just clean house and start over, but they don't win the games that matter. And that's, to me, where I think Kentucky fans would say, oh, the Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl since blah, blah, blah. But I bring it up because where Kentucky is now is I don't think their fans are national championship or bust. If they got to an Elite Eight and they lost to UCLA or Baylor, or they got to a Final Four and lost to Kansas or North, they'd be frustrated, but you can't lose to St. Peter's. And it's like I said with the Cowboys, you can lose in the playoffs. You can't lose because Dak doesn't know when to spike the ball and when to go, and you're running upfield. And it's, and that to me is where we are with Kentucky. I really don't believe that the fan base is, if we don't win a national title, fire everybody. That's not what it's about. But you can't lose to St. Peter's as a 15 seed. And again, by the way, in a season where Duke is in a Final Four, Kansas is in a Final Four, all the schools that have all the advantages that you do, they're in the Final Four, Elite Eight. You're at home because St. Peter's beat you, a school that plays in a high school gym. Sorry.
So finally, listen, college officiating isn't great. And one of the reasons is because in college football, you have 131 programs or 130. College basketball, you have like 350. It's a math equation. You need 3 referees, right? And there's 350 programs. It's a numbers. The NBA only has 70 refs. They work them hard. They're all well compensated. I think you'll make almost $200,000 a year your first year in the NBA, $550 or more with some comps once you're a senior official. So the NBA, very small, highly compensated group of mostly veteran officials. In college basketball, you get some young guys. It's hard to find them. These guys are hustlers. Now, an SEC ref can make $175, $200 a year. No question. Those guys are hustlers, right? So I was talking to a friend about this. I said, I wonder if you could do this. You have 12 to 15 full-time college basketball officials. That's it. Paid for by the NCAA. You put one in every Power 5 conference, 3 guys, 3 people, Pac-12, Big 12, Big 10, ACC, SEC. And they do the big TV games. So the stuff going out to the public, it's the number one crew. Then the tournament comes. Those guys, again, get the big dog seeds. And it sounds maybe idealistic. I don't think referees alter this tournament, but there are times that aesthetically, it's just bad optics. The NFL preseason, it's just bad optics. There's nobody in the stands, baseball in April. That's why I've said, cut some games out, start in May. There's like rainouts for 30 days. And I do think college basketball officiating, that first weekend, all those teams, it's just hard. You got so many teams. Is it something they're concerned about? Or is this just me pie in the sky? Or do they look and say, we got to get a little cleaner in these big TV moments?
Well, yeah, I think anytime, and the thing is too, the most prominent voices in this sport, I hate to say it, you can't watch a game that Jay Billis is calling without Jay Billis, I'll be polite, he gets a little frustrated at the time. Where were you going to say? I didn't know if you were going to say something there. So I don't think it's good. I think the biggest thing, Colin, I don't think people realize this. As you said, they're independent contractors. I mean, some of these guys and girls, they'll work 5 games a week, like 4 games a week. They'll be in Syracuse on a Tuesday, get on a flight and be at NC State that night, and they're 50, 60, 45-year-old people, and there's nothing wrong with it. Make a living, do what you got to do. But, I don't have all the answers. And I do think sometimes it's a little bit overblown. Like, most of these games, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but the right team won, the better team won.
Yes.
Duke beat whoever because Duke is the best team right now as we speak. But I do think it is tough with the block charge. It is tough with just the inconsistency. And it is kind of, I don't know if funny is the right word. I kind of feel bad, but there's been 2 or 3 times where they've had to bring in Gene Steratore, the rules expert there, and I don't know him at all. But he's basically had to say, they kind of missed that one on the court, and you feel bad for him. It's like, these are his friends and colleagues and things like that. So I do think there's an optical thing. I think, here's the thing though, right? Is like everything else with the NCAA, there's no leadership. And so because there's no leadership, because there's no one at the top, and it's the same with the transfer portal, it's the same with NIL, it's the same with every major problem in college sports right now, is who do you go to? Who wants to make those decisions? Who wants to put the plan together? Who rubber stamps it? And so that's the unfortunate part. I love college sports. I love college basketball. But this is where we are with college sports right now, is there's no leadership at the top at the NCAA. There's no leadership at the top with Indianapolis. And until it gets there, I don't see very much changing. I really don't.
All right. Give me next weekend's matchups, who you like and why.
Well, Villanova, Kansas is the early game. It's hard for me to pick Villanova, not because I don't love Jay Wright. I think he's unbelievable, but they just lost their second best player right before we started recording here. We find out there's an Achilles tear. You feel awful for the kid. I mean, final minute of the game, all that stuff. Jay Wright's awesome. They were already shorthanded. They really only play about 7 guys. They lost a guy last weekend. They now lose this guy. They're down to 5 or 6 guys. I just think it's hard, man. I just think it's hard against this Villanova team. And then the Coach K, Coach K's got coach. Let's just, what do you say, Colin? Say it out loud. Duke has the best coach. Duke has the best players. And what I say before, they have 5 guys that potentially could be in the NBA next year. They'll certainly be in the NBA at some point. I know Carolina beat them. And, if you say on social media, you think Duke's going to do this. Oh, Carolina just beat them 3 weeks ago. You don't know anything. Maybe I don't know anything, but I'm just saying Duke's got the best players. As you said, they're getting better every single game in this tournament. And apparently the stage isn't too big for them, right? I know sometimes that's a little bit of a cliche, but they get better late in games when they need to make plays. The Michigan State game, the Texas Tech, that's what stood out. They got all these young guys and they're fearless. Banchero's hitting threes. Jeremy Roach, your guy, is going into the paint and getting buckets. So I find it hard to believe that Duke's going to lose to Carolina again. I know Carolina's playing well, but what an unbelievable Final Four, man. I cannot believe we're getting Carolina and Duke in the Final Four. So
well, and I also think, and Jeremy Roach gets a lot of crap, but I will say this. Not everybody excels high school to college. Like Duke's a big environment, and he's a kid that didn't. People kind of they didn't love him much. And the other day I was like, oh my God, he'll probably be a second round pick in the NBA. He's not like wildly athletic. His comp is Lowry, the longtime NBA guard. Good, smart player. But what I noticed with Duke in this tournament, and again, you watch all these games, but there's a clarity to the way Duke plays. 6 minutes left against Michigan State. The ball was in the best player's hands, and you could tell they were like, I got to score the ball. And it was like, okay, it had a little NBA feel. It was like, all right, guys, the C's part, wing player, getting the ball. That's a big advantage, Aaron. Get a bucket players. They got more of them.
That's what it comes down to. And it goes back to, first of all, even with Roach, he had some injuries in high school. So I just think it's been a really slow recovery process. And you know how injuries work. Guys aren't confident, all that stuff. But that's what I go back to with Duke. And I go back to that Arkansas game the other night. Arkansas, the head coach, Eric Musselman, I know well, came from the NBA. And the NBA is, we want to isolate whatever you do poorly on defense and go after it. And we want to take away your strength on offense when we're on defense. And you saw that in the Gonzaga game when Arkansas played them. They didn't let them run the fast break. Andrew Nembhard, the point guard, couldn't get going. Then he played Duke. all 5 guys can beat you. So, how do you take away a strength? How do you take away a strength when 4 or 5 guys can beat you at any given time? So, like I said, I'll readily admit I wasn't the guy that came into this thinking that Duke was going to win it. I thought they were too hot and cold all year. I never questioned the talent. But like you said, it just feels like they're gaining confidence every single game, every single time they take the court. And listen, I know a lot of people are anti-Duke. I think it's kind of been fun to watch. And my whole thing is if Duke's here, I think a lot of people assumed it's going to be the refs or they're just going out and winning games, man. And they're making plays late. It's like Matt Stafford in the playoffs. I don't care if you like Matt Stafford when he's throwing the ball 60 yards downfield to Cooper Kupp, he's making plays. He's doing what he has to do. So,
yeah. The Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. He is encyclopedic with his knowledge. Also, he's a mile deep in his passion. And I follow you. You argue. You're feisty. I love it. It's exactly what you should do in your space.
I mean, listen, first of all, got to have fun in this. We're just talking about sports. And, I got all of NBA Twitter upset this weekend because I said something, which is fine. It was misinterpreted, as many things are on social media. But, at the end of the day, we all have opinions. And I said to my producer the other night, it's like the old George Costanza. It's not a lie if you believe it. It's like, it's not a bad opinion if that's what you actually believe. And so, so sometimes I hit and sometimes I miss, and, you move on to the next one. So
great seeing you. Continued success. You are one of those guys that has never wavered on your love for college basketball. It's because of the nature of what has happened culturally in basketball, where it's almost like the NBA has taken an anti-college basketball stance, whereas the NFL is very collaborative with college football. They like it as a teaching and mentoring stage, a minor league system. The NBA does not view college basketball that way, I don't believe, and sometimes to the the peril of the sport. I've argued this now for 2 to 3 years. Coach K or a G League coach?
So
to me, it's
when I say it, I'm the college basketball homer. So I let you say it, and and here's the other thing too, which because you have been around. I'm telling you, let's go to one of the biggest NBA stories right now, Zion Williamson. Okay, when he goes into the league, everyone's like, oh, well, I mean, he'll lose that baby fat because he's going to get with a real trainer and I'm like, have you been to Duke? I was like, I guarantee Duke's got better weight training, meal prep, nutritionists, massage therapists, you name it. Duke basketball, Kentucky basketball, Kansas, USC football, Notre Dame football, they're not lacking for anything. And so that's another conversation for another day. There's plenty of kids that have taken that G League route, alternative route. The sport continues to go on. I do think now NIL helps. I do think, I'll say this, I think having a normal NCAA tournament helps, right? How big has it been for Paolo Banchero? Let me ask you, did you know much about Paolo Banchero, the Duke star before? Yeah. Nope. So Chet Holmgren, I mean, people are busy. And you said it right. I love college basketball. I understand that 99% of people are busy. They follow the NBA. They follow the NFL until February. They play fantasy football. They'll tune into a game here or there. The NCAA tournament was good for Chet Holmgren. The NCAA tournament last year was great for Jalen Suggs, Davion Mitchell from Baylor, Paolo Banchero this year. So, the sport's got its flaws, and I get it. It doesn't, I understand it is a 3, 4, 5 week sport for most of mainstream America, and that's okay. But man, tell me this. Once the tournament tips and there's people in the stands and not everybody's 6 feet apart it's a fun event to watch and follow. Am I correct?
Okay. Yeah. New Orleans isn't a top 10 city for me, but Mardi Gras is probably the greatest 2-week stretch in any city in America. Right. Sure. So not everything is everything. Like Los Angeles winters are unbelievable. So are Phoenix. Try living there in the summer. So cities have events and they have 3-week festivals. And I think March Madness is the best festival in sports along with the World Cup. Those to me are like the World Cup every 4 years. College basketball, the World Cup's about 3 weeks every 4 years. And college basketball is 3 weeks every year. And those are the best events that we have in sports. And instead of criticizing it, I tell people this all the time. I don't talk regular season baseball or regular season college basketball. It's an event. And for 3 weeks, that's when it owns us. And it should just embrace it. It's okay. It's not a criticism. As a sportscaster, if you're a sportscaster in Canada, you do 70% hockey. If you're a sportscaster in London, you do 70% English Premier League. In this country, you do 70% football. Because we bet it, we watch it. They, as a league, they space it out. Free agency, combine, draft, camp. So sometimes I think college basketball fans, you don't watch all the games. No. You watch the games, and then we'll come in, enjoy the festival, and give it tons of marketing and promotion. It's not a negative. It's an unbelievable, wonderful 3-week period in America, and we missed it. We really missed it.
And really for 2 years, too, because last year there was a tournament, but like I said, and we don't have to belabor the point, but in one stadium, half capacity, whatever. You get the point. So it's great to have it back. And I'm happy that everybody, I think, is starting to appreciate how fun, as you said, tournament, festival, whatever, how fun it is. It's just fun. Just enjoy it. Grab a beer. You don't have to, I don't know. I love it. And I'm glad to see people realizing, how much fun it can be, even though, again, I get it's not a 365-day-a-year sport, and that's okay,
Yeah. And for the people that argue it's luck, it's random, Duke, Carolina, Villanova, Kansas, no, it's not. Like every other playoff, 1-game playoff or 7-game playoff, the best teams overwhelmingly, the cream rises in every sport, which to me validates the tournament. If we had St. Peter's winning it, you'd be like, okay, this is nonsense. No. Like college football, Ohio State, Alabama, we get the blue bloods, and that tells you that it works. If we had 8 seeds winning this thing, we'd be like, okay, we're making this too difficult for the most talented teams.
Well, and I was going to say, no, even Carolina, they got 4 McDonald's. The kid Caleb Love was a top 15 kid coming out of high school. It didn't click right away. Credit to him. He didn't rush the process. He came back for a sophomore year. They got McDonald's All-Americans up and down that roster. They got the best coaches. Again, it goes back to what we were talking about. Best facilities, best training. They recruit the best players. Yes, they're an 8 seed, but go back to the preseason AP poll. I think they were ranked 12th or 13th.
Aaron, great seeing you, buddy.
Anytime. Next March, just let me know. I'm down.
All right, my man.